'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a louse. The traps were all set by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would step there. The children were all nestled, all snug in their beds, while nightmares of body parts danced in their heads. And Mama with her hatchet, and I with my axe, had just settled down for a little nightcap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my chair to see what made the splatter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and ripped through the sash. The moon on the breast of the blood-stained snow gave a hideous glow to objects below, when what to my wondering eye should appear, the watchman was dead with a knife in his ear.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Odd Virginia. Today we're doing our Christmas special because this Friday falls on Christmas Eve. So happy Christmas Eve, everyone, and also Happy New Year because I'm not going to be seeing you guys until next year. But yeah, my name's Alex Koska, and today I've got a co-host on the show with me. It's Q, aka Po Boy Q. You might remember him from episode 3, The Witch House. Q, how you doing tonight, man?
I am doing great. Just ready for the holidays to be over.
Same. Yeah, the holidays have been, they've been pushing me pretty hard, pushing my buttons.
I definitely feel that.
Yeah, it's tough in certain industries to work through the holidays. But yeah, I hope that, Christmas being my one holiday off that I get at this job, it's going to be a good day. Hope the same for you.
Yes, they gave us off and we get paid, so I'm good with it.
Oh, yeah. And thinking about the new year, man, I've got a New Year's resolution. I don't know about you. You got anything lined up for that?
Yeah, I don't want to be, I want to lose weight and stuff, because I do want to do these things, but ultimately I just want to be better, at everything that I do. And I'm only getting older. I really just want to, focus on getting out of this, just putting my music out, and all the other things that I want to pursue. I want to do better in 2022.
So that sounds like a prioritization kind of thing. It's like trying to line up what things really need to be done and what things you can do without, I guess. Like for me, it's video games. Now that I've started this new job, I don't have time for video games. And I realize how little they actually do to benefit me as a whole. They're a great way to kill time, I guess, but I'm not being productive, not really getting much of a peace of mind when I play video games. So that's definitely a thing for me, is a lot of that extraneous sort of media I could do without. But personally, I'm doing the exact same resolution I had last year. I made it about 3 months. I was eating only meat because of my skin condition. That seemed to help a lot. And so I managed to go 3 months with just beef, salt, and water as my entire diet, and it helped a lot. So I want to do that again, but make it go further. And maybe I'll give myself one cheat day per month this time around, because once St. Patrick's Day came around, I had a couple drinks with my friends. We had a little party. It was the first party I'd gone to in the year. And after that, it kind of spiraled out of control, where it's just I like drinking and I like eating things I'm not supposed to eat, things that aren't particularly good for me. And I know it sounds crazy, but just doing that meat, water, and salt really, really helped me as far as my health is concerned and my autoimmune disease. So I'm going to try to go back to that and do it again, and hopefully, really carry the torch this time. But 3 months, that ain't bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. And Yeah, you definitely can do it. Like, I know that I can do these things. We just got to like be steadfast in our resoluteness as far as, getting where we want to be, and, just making it like a staple and not letting ourselves down.
Yeah, the sticking to something's really hard. I mean, it takes some sort of like Zen kind of discipline, that sort of Shaolin monk kind of focus. And I'd like to be stronger in that kind of way. I'd like to have a very stronger willpower, and choose to do what is best for me rather than give in to temptation. So that's a big thing for me this year. I really want to straighten up a little more. Just straighten up a little more. But Q, I don't know about you, but I am really into uh giants, North American giant legends. Do you know anything about anything like that?
Well, I have like, well, all over the world, really. I've like heard and like seen like proof that like um there were giants. Like, it's evidence. It's like a lot of stuff, that we were told or we don't believe in is like actually like coming to be, like as we get older and walk our paths. So like I definitely believe that it's possible. I don't really like say a lot of things aren't possible. Like me before, I was a hardcore alien disbeliever, and now I'm just like, I think it's possible, but just not in the way that they show it to you on TV.
Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from there. Well, I've never denied the possibility of aliens, or basically anything that falls outside of the purview of the normal or supposedly natural. I mean, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, I do think all of these weird things are natural and just very rare, you could say. But when it comes to the giants, this is a subject that's fascinated me for a very long time. And you're right that there are legends of giants worldwide. You hear about it from, say, the Bible, with
Yeah.
there are giants in those times and giants after, which is the book of Genesis, I believe, the flood of Noah. And if you go into things like the extra canon books, like the Book of Enoch, there's a lot about the Watchers and the giants as well. But in North America during the 1800s, there were just hundreds of newspaper articles about people digging up burial mounds and finding skeletons, 7 to 9 to 10 feet long in these burial mounds. And they were always shipped off to the Smithsonian and never seen again. And the Smithsonian says, no, we're not harboring these, giant skeletons. So the buck kind of stops there. It's like, what is this all about? I'm one of those kinds of guys who, you need evidence to know for certain whether something is true. But at the same time, for me, a whole bunch of reported cases from completely unrelated individuals and unrelated circumstances reporting the same thing over and over again, it's anecdotal data, sure, but it is a confirmation to me when it comes to things like Sasquatch. You get, a couple thousand sightings a year reported. And these are people who don't know each other. Why would a couple thousand people make this up every year? And it's the same thing for the Giants for me. Like, why would there be a couple hundred articles back in the 1800s of giant reportings? Like, they dig up the bones. It's not like they're actually seeing giants. They're digging up bones. They have that physical, tangible evidence. They've taken pictures of them. They appear in the newspaper articles. But what I'm getting at here is I've always wanted to find an instance of this happening in Virginia. And I've looked and looked and never found anything. But today I was watching a video by Robert Sepper. Have you ever heard of Robert Sepper before?
Maybe I have, but just not by like the name.
Okay, well, Robert Sepper is an anthropologist. He's an author and an anthropologist, and he deals with a lot of this kind of what people would say like fringe topics, I suppose. I don't know. He seems like a pretty rational man to me. But I was watching his video today, which was like an hour long, and he was bringing up all these 1800s newspaper articles about giant bones being dug up. And one of them was entitled, More Big Indians Found in Virginia. And this was September 8th in 1871, posted by the New York Times. And I was like, wait, pause, rewind, listen again. Like, okay. There is a instance of these giants being dug up in Virginia. Finally, I got one. So I scoured the internet for about 30 minutes after watching that video, and I finally found the full article. So let me read that to you now. Once again, New York Times, published in September 8th of 1871. Not to be behind Canada, Virginia puts in a claim of the possession of a cave full of dead Indians. The Petersburg Index giving tale as quoted below. On the authority of gentlemen whom it asserts to be of the highest character and credit, who have seen with their own eyes and touched and tested with their own hands the wonderful objects, or which they make report as follows. The workmen engaged in opening way for projected railroad between Weldon and Gettysburg struck Monday, about 1 mile from the former place, in a bank beside the river, a catacomb of skeletons supposed to be those of Indians, of a remote age and lost and forgotten race. The bodies exhumed were of a strange and remarkable formation. The skulls were nearly an inch in thickness, the teeth were filed sharp, as those of cannibals, the enamel perfectly preserved. The bones were of wonderful length and strength, the femur as long as a leg of an ordinary man, the stature of the body being probably as great as 8 or 9 feet. Near their heads were sharp stone arrows, stone mortars, in which their corn was brayed, and the bowls of pipes, apparently soft pliable soapstone. The teeth of the skeletons are said to be as large as those of horses. One of them has been brought to the city and presented to the officer of Petersburg Railroad. The bodies were found closely packed together, laid tier on tier as it seemed. There were no discernible ingress into egress out of the mound. New York Times, September 8th, 1871. What do you think of that?
That sounds pretty wild.
Yeah.
So it's like they had the proof, but then like I guess they just suppress it.
Yeah, well, that's always the big question with this topic, because once again, back in the 1800s, it was kind of a wild frontier, and at the time, archaeology was kind of a new thing, right? So people were digging up and exhuming a lot of Indian burial mounds, and they're finding all sorts of these big skeletons, allegedly, and time after time, they're shipped off to the Smithsonian, never seen again, and the Smithsonian says they don't have them. So, once again, that's where the buck stops. Kind of a he said, she said at that point.
Yeah, because maybe it was just like they didn't like want to make a lot of questions or like cause like a panic, because it's just like they want you to be like scared, but like not scared of otherworldly things. That like they don't want you to believe that it's possible, that like giants existed and Sasquatch and all those things and the Jersey Devil, like it's all like real,
Well, that's kind of the thing, is like, why would there be a cover up of these things? Should they be true? Like, what are they afraid of if we know that there are such things as giants and otherworldly beings, such as like, the Sasquatch or the aliens or whatever kind of cover up you want to prospect? Like, what would be the purpose of the cover up as it is?
I don't know. That's a very good question. Like when I think about it, like it is like something I can't really think about because I don't know why. Like what would be the point?
Well, I think personally, and this is just my hunch as well as I can develop one, is that it is about kind of control of the masses. I'm sure just about everybody who suspects that there is a cover up would propose this kind of same kind of line of thinking, is that they don't want you to know the truth for any particular reason, because that would for some reason empower you and cause you to rise up against all their bullshit. And there's a lot of bullshit, tons of bullshit, and you can see now more than ever they're trying to control us. The very word mandate is becoming a virtue now.
Yeah, it does make sense. Like, and I thought about that as a possibility, but I was just like, why? Like what would us knowing have to like do with them? But I could see, like, I mean, I did think about that. I thought about it, like control, like not believing that like you can make it out this, that you have to like rely on the people, like who are the leaders. But honestly, I don't know like a lot of truth. But if you like look on I think it's like the CIA webpage, like 'cause they have declassified documents. And like one of them that a lot of people have been talking about recently is the gateway process, like about how like I think that we do like live in a hologram and we can we powerful. Like every one of us is powerful, but like all the stuff that we have like in the world dilutes all that power. So we can't let go where we need to go and do the things that we need to do, because then no, they wouldn't have power anymore. So
Yeah, all that kind of like simulation theory sort of stuff is really beyond me. I've looked into it a bit, and it's just so, you know, huge in scope that I can't quite wrap my head around all of it. So there might be something to that. I don't have any ground to stand on saying one way or the other. But for me, I think that there is also, maybe not even so pointedly, there's just like this established mainstream scientific view of, the past, the historic narrative that has been established. And the people who are kind of ingrained and invested in that historic narrative don't want it to be rattled in any way based on new discoveries. And you'll see this a lot. The people who are actually discovering things and proposing new ideas based on, whatever the evidence suggests, if they're going to kind of infer an assumption based on that evidence, the people in mainstream science are going to reject it outright because it doesn't fit what they've already decided has happened. What they've already decided is the way that the world came to be as it is today. Even if it's not true, like truth isn't really their goal. What their goal is to be an authority on the subject. And I think the idea of something like giants, or just any sort of little thing that might shake the popular narrative of what history is and actually suggest that it could be something else, they're going to reject it based on the sole principle that makes them less of an authority on the subject. The fact that they have to admit that they don't know. So they're going to double down, and they're going to say no, 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 and we're going to hide everything to the contrary, right?
that makes a lot of sense. Like it does. Like, and that's like the stuff that like I don't think about it, I can't like wrap my mind about. But like it goes deep, but it's also like kind of simple.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we think about these sort of theories, we lean a little too much into the idea that there's like this kind of nefarious aspect to it. Whereas it could just be more of like, I'm the king of the castle right now, and I don't want to be proven false because that would discredit me, as opposed to like, oh no, I have to control you to, turn you into a battery like in Matrix, right? Or, to power my machine of reptilian evil and genocide. It might not go that deep. It could just be the fact that somebody doesn't want to be discredited. Anyway, that was just sort of a tangent for our intro. We're going to get into some more Reddit horror stories today from Virginia. Q and I are going to read out some of these stories that we find on Reddit, and they're sure to chill you to your bones. With that being said, if any of you out there listening have a story that you would like to share on the show, you can reach out to me at oddvirginia@protonmail.com. Send me an email, get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you and have you on if you'd like to share your story. That's oddvirginia@protonmail.com. Because here at Odd Virginia,
we're ready to believe you.
All right, so let's get into our first story. This is posted on a subreddit called The Truth Is Here. It's posted by a user named Mystery Fruit Snack, and the title is Giant Wolf-like Creature. And it reads, 10 or so years ago, I was driving with my brother in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It was late at night, and we were going to grab some food. We were the only car on this road, which wasn't abnormal due to the time of the night. The right side of the road was wooded with trees, and on the left side was a fence that ran parallel to the road. A giant wolf-like creature ran full speed in front of the car. It came from the right wooded area and was booking it towards the fence. This thing was at least 12 feet tall minimum. It was hunched over, running insanely fast on its back legs. The legs were bent backwards and extremely muscular. The only way I could describe it was they were bent backwards in a way that demon legs are depicted. The legs were furless except for near the bottom where there were patches of fur. It was wearing a brown hooded cloak that was tattered along the bottom edges. The hood covered its head and midsection, leaving the legs fully exposed. Some sort of elongated snout was emerging from the front of the hood. It was square like a wolf's and had fur. The thing never turned to look at us. It was running towards the fence, jumped and cleared it. I've never seen anything jump so high. I spent the next couple of moments trying to process what I saw. I thought there was some kind of logical explanation until my brother said, "Did you see that?" and described it in detail, exactly what I had seen. The only thing that differed was he saw what he described as long claws emerging from the front of the cloak. Seeing this thing terrified me. 10 years later, I'm still terrified. Any ideas of what it was? And later they edited the post and added, "The cloak and the backwards legs were something I really focused on. The cloak was cloth, and I'm certain it wasn't fur or anything else. My husband seems to think what I described was a Wendigo, which I'm not sure the description matches at all. It didn't have antlers, and from what I looked at, those things live way up north. He did mention that there were Algonquin-speaking people, Chesapeake tribe, living in Virginia Beach many years ago." And so that's the end of that story. I don't know, man. The 12-foot tall, running on the back legs, wolf-like creature sounds a lot like a dogman. I don't know if you're familiar at all with the dogman stories or North American werewolf or the Beast of Bray Road or anything like that. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, like a little bit. And I would say that, like, I think that you are right. Like, I don't know about the Wendigo, like, theory, but it seems to be, like, in that category.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a Wendigo to me. We've covered Wendigos pretty well on this show, up to this point at least. But this, to me, does sound like a dogman. The weird thing about it is the clothing. It's very, very rare to hear a dogman story in which it's wearing clothing. And for all those people out there who would consider the dogman to be, like a naturalistic animal, such as like a fox or a hare or something like that, those things don't wear clothes, and neither would a dogman, should it be a naturalistic animal as we know them. There's a little bit of credibility toward it being more of a supernatural or a shapeshifted human when you come to things like the wearing of cloaks. And all of the ancient legends that describe these wolf-like humanoid creatures always talk about them being shapeshifters. But who knows? Really,
that's what I was thinking though, about like the cloak and stuff. Like yeah. So
yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything to that, the shapeshifter legends, but it comes from Germany and from ancient North America. Before there were Europeans, there was those stories of the shapeshifting witches, or black magic practitioners who could change into animal form. And then in France, you had the loup-garou, which is also a human who turns into a wolf on two legs. So, from all those vastly different places of the world, you do have those stories. But nowadays, it seems to be much more popular and prevalent to think of the dogman as a creature that is in that form 24/7, even if it is perhaps paranormal or supernatural and can come from one plane to the next. They always seem to say that it's always in that form. So yeah, I don't really know. That's a crazy story though. 12 feet tall, wearing a cloak. I've never heard that before.
yeah.
I've definitely heard of 12 feet tall. Hell, I've probably even seen a video of a 12-foot tall dog man. If anybody's aware of the Facebook Live video that was taken, I think around Port St. Lucie, Florida. That was a hell of a video. But yeah, wearing a cloak, I've never. That's out of this world. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, so this story is from Reddit, and it's r/no sleep, and it is posted by the Big Wiggly. And the title is, "I've lived in the backwoods of Virginia for the past 15 years, and I have a few stories worth telling." Hello, No Sleep. My name is Brian, and from the time I was 4 years old, I've lived in the forest in a fairly remote part of Virginia. I'm obviously not going to disclose the exact location, but I can tell you I was only about an hour's drive from DC, in an area where everyone swears they're from Northern Virginia, but really they aren't. The main thing to understand is that I was so far removed from civilization that I never had internet access. Even now, there isn't any available form of cell phone service, internet, Wi-Fi, nothing. It's a genuine dead zone in a world full of technology. Now that I've moved away to attend college, however, I have access to all of the bandwidth I could ever desire, and I've been lurking on the subreddit for a good while. During my time in those woods, I experienced a fair amount of things that I never could explain, and now that I have the means to share these stories, I'm more than happy to do so. I hope you all enjoy them. The earliest story is from when I was around 8 years old. Our house sat just off the road, but the trees were so thick you would never see it if you weren't looking for it. My parents owned 55 acres of land, almost entirely forest, and our closest neighbors were a pretty good distance away, probably about half a mile down the road, but only a few hundred yards if you walked straight through the woods. We had dozens of trails leading into the woods around our yard, and they all converged about 50 yards into the woods in a giant field, surrounded by forest on all sides, where we had our septic tanks buried. From the central hub of trails, you could see onto our neighbor's property. So I knew very soon after we moved in that they kept goats and other livestock in the fields behind their house. Frequently, the goats would find their way through the wire fence and end up following the trails into our backyard. This happened every couple weeks, and it was usually the same goat who we started calling Bubbles. Yeah, Bubbles, I'm not kidding. We would usually just yell, "Go home, Bubbles," at it until it retreated back down the trails and out of sight. One Saturday, as I was sitting home alone, I looked out back and saw a familiar shape coming down the trail. Thinking it was Bubbles, I walked out the back door, prepared to shout like an idiot at this dumb farm animal until it went home, or at least into the woods to do whatever goats do in the woods. As it got closer, however, I realized that I didn't recognize this goat. Bubbles had gray fur with a black spot on her eye. This goat was black as midnight, so much so that I could barely tell where his eyes were. Growing tired of these random goats constantly invading my yard, I decided to walk this goat back home and try to find the spot where it broke through the fence, so my father could fix it when he got home. As we started down the trail, I noticed that the usual ambient sounds in the forest were very quiet. I could hear them, but they sounded distant, like all the animals had evacuated that section of the forest. We hit the trail hub, and I noticed that it was now dead silent. No animal noise, nothing. I also noticed that there were no other animals out on the neighbor's property. I wish I could say my instincts told me to leave, but they didn't. I was a confident 8-year-old kid. I could use the karate I learned from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to go toe-to-toe with Superman, as far as I'm concerned. Then I started to hear it at first, no louder than a whisper. Someone was talking. I couldn't tell where it was coming from because it seemed to be coming from all around me. I could barely, just barely make out the words, "Come here, boy. Come here." So being the fearless 8-year-old, I called out, "Who's that?" Apparently that was the wrong answer. The woods around me exploded with a noise that I can only describe as the sound of a bass guitar would make if you tuned it down incredibly low and then slapped every string as hard as you could. I could feel the percussive notes through my body, and I immediately started running for my house, screaming. As I reached the edge of the clearing, I looked back and saw the goat, standing. It was on its rear legs with its front legs up like a dog trying to reach a treat above his head. I could tell it was staring at me. I ran faster than I ever had before. When I got home, my dad was already there, and I told him about the goat. "Yeah, you've seen them before. The neighbor's goats come around all the time," he said. I didn't press the matter further, knowing he wouldn't believe me, and I haven't seen the goat since, but the whole thing still bothers the crap out of me. The second story is from my high school days, when we had nothing to do besides get drunk and have a sober friend drive us around while we acted obnoxious. We had heard a story that near my property was a haunted house with a ghost that would chase people down the driveway. We had nothing better to do, so we got the street name and set out around 11 p.m. to find the place. Turns out it was much easier to find than expected. The house stuck out like nobody's business. It was the strangest looking house I've ever seen. The whole thing was shaped like a 30-foot tall bay window. One side stuck out, and other side was completely fat. Like someone took a hexagonal pillar and split it perfectly in half, from one corner to the other. It was 3 stories high, and the way it faced the road, it looked like a giant vinyl-sided wall just sticking out of the ground. As we pulled up, we all saw a light coming from the top floor window. It looked like a green laser pointer, and my first thought was that one of my friends had one and was shooting it at the window until I realized it was wrong. It was a ball. about the size of a golf ball, glowing that cheap glow stick shade of neon green. I then assumed the house was populated and that someone was inside, with the sole intention of fucking with drunk teenagers like us until it started floating. It started zipping around outside the window, darting back and forth so fast that I could see the trail of the after image long behind it. We were all caught in this trance, watching this ball like cats following a laser pointer. Finally, it occurred to me that we should not be at this oddly shaped house with creepy ghost lights in the middle of BFE, and I yelled at my friend Ritter, who was driving, "Reverse, now!" I guess my yelling broke the trance because the next thing I remember, we were blazing down the road in reverse, faster than we ever should have been going. We were all still locked onto the ball, which was now darting towards our vehicle. As we left the driveway, the ball stopped, then made a clockwise circle in the air and snapped back into the window like a slingshot. We made it back to my place without any other incidents, and we all slept in the same room with the lights on that night.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I don't usually read the No Sleep subreddit because I feel like I'm I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of like creepypastas on there that people just make up. But that story strikes me as very legitimate to that person's experience as they can best describe it. And this person's hilarious. First of all, the Big Wiggly is their username. That story was just fucking funny. But the first part especially really got my attention with the goat standing on its back legs and the forest going silent. With a lot of experiences like UFOs, especially like spacecraft type UFOs, not just random balls at night, but like the things that hover close to the ground and just silently move over. Oftentimes there's that description of everything else going silent. And that also lines up with like Sasquatch experiences and Wendigo experiences. Everything goes silent, especially in the forest, because that's usually where these things are seen. So that's telling that there's possibly some sort of like a dimensional slip or a just something to do with the paranormal that creates this dampening of all extraneous sound. But then the creature standing up on his back legs, the goat standing on his back legs. That's another thing that you hear about with a lot of different animals. Dogman, first of all, we just read a Dogman story. It's always like, oh, I saw a big wolf and then it stood up on its back legs. And I've heard this with big cat stories as well. Like, oh, I saw a black panther in freaking Ohio where there are no black panthers. And it was in a cornfield and it stood up on its back legs and ran away on its back legs. And here's something I've wanted to get to for a while because I've got a friend, a really close personal friend, who has told me in confidence, but will not come on the show to share, that he saw a group of cats in a farm field one time. It was like a bunch of house cats. And as he approached them, they all stood up on their back legs and ran off. There's something about that, like animals standing up on their back legs. That has to do with these, it comes in this juxtaposition with these weird paranormal experiences. Who knows what that's all about? But it's fun, first of all, but it strikes me as really fascinating.
Yeah, for me, like it does too, because like when you think about it, it's just like it's an animal. So if it's like accustomed to using 4 legs, it's gonna be able to, go pretty quickly. But like maybe it just ain't that good at using all 4 legs, so it has to stand up, and like it could be faster that way to get away.
Yeah. Well, with these animals, they're built to run on 4 legs, and there are times where like you've seen. There was a bear who had its front paws that were broken, and so it learned to walk on its back 2 legs, and it was not efficient. Like it didn't get around very well, but it was the walking bear. Like this community knew it. It was a bear that walked on its back legs, and it was slow. An animal like this, if it becomes injured and to the point that it has to use its back legs, it's not going to be good on them. It's not going to be able to get away quickly. There's definitely something different going on with these types of stories. But the second story, first of all, being very interesting, reminds me a lot of what you and I did before we started recording. We went out to see that witch's house that you talked about in episode 3. And, it brought that same sort of feeling in like, oh, we found the place and we took pictures of it. So I'm going to include those pictures and the links to those pictures in the show notes for this episode. But that place was crazy looking, dude. There was like boulders upon boulders stacked up. You know how people will make those like little rock stacks by a river or something, or out in a hiking trail. It was that with like 150-pound boulders all over this property. It was ridiculous. I didn't realize what it was going to be that weird when you first told me about it.
I forgot all about those, but like going back there, like I remember them too. But like I'm gonna tell you, like we always went. It was like the lightest time we went. It was like dusk, you know. So like you could see, but like barely. And then like this is the only time I ever been like when you can see like everything. And like I didn't even realize, like I didn't think about it until just now. Like okay, so the rock stacked, somebody stacked them, but yo, them things was heavy. So you would need a group of people or some heavy machinery, or like how did they do that, you know?
Yeah, that's what I've always wondered as well. There was a place that I found when I was hiking one time, and I like to adventure, so I saw a cliff off the trail, and I decided I was going to climb up there. It looked like I could get up it, so I did, and I climbed up that, and then I kept on walking up the mountain, and I found another cliff and climbed up that. And when I get to the top, there's this little fire pit up there with, you know, really big rocks circled in a circle to make a fire pit. And then there were like these huge rocks that were positioned and like inlaid in the dirt perfectly to make like this recliner chair. And I was like, man, somebody like really put some work into this way up here, like someplace no one else should know about. They came up here and they made this beautiful little spot to just like hang out in. And so I went up there a couple times, and the next time I went up, that chair was gone. And it was like, okay, who is moving these massive rocks? I don't get it.
That sounds crazy. Like honestly, like if you think about it, like because it was up there, it's probably like some place I couldn't get to easily. And then you talking about like those rocks, like they were huge, like they probably weighed a lot. So like, how could you do that?
No, it's definitely not easy to get up there, but I know that like the people who maintain that area do go up there, because I went all the way up top there one time, and somebody had obviously taken a chainsaw up there to a tree. And you know, like this is sheer cliff climbing. Like you are finding the littlest handholds you can to get up on top of this ridge. And somebody had obviously gotten up there with a chainsaw one time. So I know people go up there, but it's like, you know, how are you moving these huge boulders? That's my question. And I know people do it because I've seen it before, but like, how is my question?
It's beyond me, man. It's beyond me.
Yeah, it's something else. And like, why would you ruin a perfectly good recliner chair made out of granite? That's another question I've got.
It's like, because we wanted the granite.
Yeah, so at the end of that last post, there's a link to a part 2. It says he has at least 3 or 4 more stories. So if you want to read those.
All right, I'm totally down. All right. Hello again, everyone. This is on r/no sleep on Reddit, and it is, I've lived in the backwoods of Virginia for the past 15 years, and I have a few stories worth telling. This is part 2, and this is Brian again with his story from Virginia. Hello again, everyone. I'm back with more stories. If you haven't read my first post, you can find the link here. More than a few people have taken guesses at my location, but I'm not going to confirm or deny anything, because even though I don't live there anymore, and I would be more than happy to tell you all where to find terrifying Satan goats in the middle of the forest, my mother still lives on that property, and I'm sure she would like me to respect her privacy. That being said, I'm just going to jump right into the stories. One user asked me if I had ever heard strange music in the middle of the night while walking or driving. I don't generally wander around on foot at night for obvious reasons, but I've definitely heard some interesting sounds. On many nights at varying times, usually between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., I've noticed chimes sounding. Sometimes they're very high-pitched, like the sets of wind chimes that people hang on their porches. Other times, they're deeper, like the big orchestral sets you play with mallets. Usually, the wind chimes are random. just like a set changing together in the wind. And no, we have never owned any wind chimes. I've checked on many occasions when it started to drive me bonkers. The deep chimes, though, always form some melody, and it's always different. Being a percussionist myself, I started memorizing the melodies, and when I would go into band class, I would take random sheet music I found and play it on the school's chime set, hoping to find something that sounded remotely similar. I never found anything close to what I heard. The sound is also best heard from the kitchen, not outside. It's like it originates in the kitchen, by the back window. Again, I've torn that kitchen apart looking for any kind of speaker or some elaborate prank, but I've never found anything, and I'm not sure what to think of it. I'm not sure how this next story slipped my mind the first time I posted. I guess I chose to forget because I don't think anything has ever nagged at the back of my mind quite like this. When I was around 10 years old, my dad finally took me into the woods to go hunting for the first time. I'd gone with him before, but this time he actually decided to let me do the shooting. So we sat out in a tree at the ass crack of dawn, and soon enough, a small buck walks into view about 20 yards away. I pulled the 20 gauge shotgun up to my shoulder, took a deep breath, and barely hit it. So we get down out of the tree, and my dad starts following the trail of blood, which leads into the woods and out of sight down a hill into a creek bed. Coming back, he takes the gun from me and starts back towards the wounded deer, sparing my young soul the trauma of having to finish off an animal up close with a shotgun. About 30 seconds after he reaches the top of his hill, I hear him yelling, and I manage to catch, "The fuck?" followed by a shotgun blast. Then another. At this point, I'm a little worried, but my dad was Superman to me at this time in my life. He just took out an armored zombie bear, for all I knew. Anyway, a few seconds later, he's back over the hill, panting. No deer in sight. He shuffles towards me at a fast walk, and I realize now he was trying not to run as to keep me from panicking. "Let's go. We're going back to the house," he says. Of course, I asked him, "What about the deer?" "We'll come back for it. Let's go now." So we get back to the house, and he makes me go to my room. I figured I was being punished for having shitty aim or something. I could hear him talking to my mother downstairs, and I could hear concern in his voice, but I couldn't make out any words. I've asked him about it twice. When I was 14, his response to me was simply, "Don't worry about it," followed by his swift exit from the room. I asked him again about 2 years ago, and he told me he didn't even remember and that it was probably a mountain lion or something. I normally wouldn't find the explanation hard to believe, but having been around my dad all my life, I can tell when he's lying. I'm sure that he ran into something in that creek bed and rattled him to this day. Next time I head home, I might ask him again. So he got rattled, basically. I messed up.
He got rattled.
Got rattled. That story, honestly, like it was like it was like a cliffhanger. Like you would never know. You know, like I hate when movies end like that. Like you would never know. And it's just like his dad. Like maybe he'll tell him. So maybe I don't know. Like no, because this was a while ago when this was wrote. But I want to know if the dad ever tells him like what did he see that unnerved him so bad that he wouldn't talk about it years later. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, well, this isn't a movie, so like it's kind of how real life works sometimes. Especially when it comes to saying, weird things in the woods. Dads do not want to break down and be like, "I saw something different." Normally they are the stoic kind of like everything's still normal kinds of guys, even if they saw something that's totally not normal. I hear about this a lot with dads, especially like the hunting sorts of dads. Like, "Dad, what the hell did you just see out there?" It's like, "Oh, it was nothing." But they saw something weird.
Yeah. Or like it might not even necessarily be like something like strange, but maybe it could have just been something that was like so horrible that he didn't want to like tell the kid, like to, mess him up, like, cause he saw something. Cause like, you never know. He never said, whether like they called the police or whatever, like he could have saw something out there.
I'm sure he would have mentioned if the police had been called on that occasion. I think what his dad saw was definitely something just weird and out of the ordinary.
Just, I can't take this. I can't. And I ain't never going to tell you about what I seen because you ain't going to be able to take it either.
Yeah, well, there are people who are like predisposed to this idea that the paranormal does not exist, and when they do see it, they tell themselves it didn't happen, right?
Like go into shock.
Yeah, it's a denial. So this sounds to me like a classic case of that. Whether it is or not, I don't know, but it's kind of what it seems like it's pointing to.
All right, so this next one isn't really a big narrative, but I thought it was worth mentioning. At the end of the road I lived on, the road forks. One way leads down another residential section. The other leads down a poorly kept dirt road that leads into the back end of the next town. About 300 yards from the fork, down the dirt road, there's a property on the right, sitting on a creek. It's roped off from the road so people can't just drive onto it. There's a big picnic shelter set up in the back corner with a stone park-style grill put in next to it. The strange thing about it, besides the fact that it's in the ass end of nowhere, is that the property is always kept perfectly. The grass is always the deepest, most vibrant shade of emerald green, even in the dead of winter, and it's always cut very neatly and low to the ground. From what I can tell, the shelter and the grill are spotless, minus a bit of wear from age. But there's no graffiti or hearts carved into the picnic table or anything like that. Again, none of this is terribly unnatural, except that in 15 years of living by it and taking that road hundreds of times, I've never seen a single person on the property, not even to maintain it. During the summer between my junior and senior years of high school, I checked it every day for 2 full weeks. Not a soul entered that lot, and yet the grass stayed perfectly kept. Unless someone sneaks in at night to mow in the pitch dark, I can't think of a reason for it to be untouched by nature. I did some digging and asked my closest neighbors in the end, and nobody seemed to know who owned the property or how it was maintained. My friends and I would joke that if you stepped onto the property, the illusion was broken and you could see the property as it was, dead, decaying, and rent asunder by time and the element. None of us ever stepped onto that lot, though. Something about it just screamed at every fiber of your being to not step over that rope line. I think there's something there that wants to be left alone, and I have every intention of honoring its wishes. When I was 16 and I had just gotten my license, I was out late with a friend of mine, who I'll call Brady. I was driving us back from a party. I was sober, mind you, and it was about 1:30 in the morning. On the road, the turn off onto mine, there's a house on the right side that sits on a massive field, and next to the road is a big pond. It's still a back road, so there are no street lights, but the moon was out, and I could see it reflecting off the pond. As we come up on it, a deer runs into the road from the left, and I hit the brakes. I was nearly stopped, and I looked over to see the deer that admittedly had nearly made me shit myself. In my peripheral vision, and saw something else move. There was a light, a blue light, moving in circles around the pond. It was so small and so dim that at first I thought it was just a floater in my eye. But as I focused on it, it became more visible. It was like someone was running laps around this pond with a little blue LED light. In fact, I would have believed it was someone doing sprints around the pond with some sort of camera recording them, and that the blue light was the recording light. Except nothing runs that fast unless we have a rare species of backwoods cheetah that I'm unfamiliar with. The pond was easily 20 yards across, and this light lapped it every 3 seconds or so. It didn't seem innately threatening, and it never made a move towards the vehicle, but the deer had already set me on edge, and so I was quick to hit the accelerator after the initial shock had worn off. For the life of me, I couldn't logically explain what it was. I've always been more curious about it than afraid, but I've never seen it since. The last story for now is another one that happened while I was driving home when I had first gotten my license. I lived towards the end of my road, and at the beginning, there was once a large farm. It's been repossessed now and subdivided into individual lots. I'm pretty sure it's because the old farmhouse that on it was condemned and the elderly couple who lived there were forced to vacate. Anyway, I was driving home one night around 2 in the morning. It was a new moon, so it was pretty much advanced darkness. I could see the farmhouse in my headlights, and I turned around to look at it out of a habit as I passed. In my side mirror, I saw something that gives me chills to this day. I saw a man in the brake lights, standing right on the edge of the road. I'm 100% sure that he was not standing there when I was approaching the house, because he would have been standing directly in my high beams. He was middle-aged looking, was fairly tall, and although the light was pretty dim, I could tell he was wearing a red and black checkered flannel shirt, work boots, a black beanie hat, and what I believed were plain black sweatpants. He also had a long, thick beard. He actually looked sort of like a typical lumberjack, not uncommon dress for the area, but it was his face that scared me the most. He looked directly into my eyes with absolutely zero expression on his face. Behind the expression, though, the malice in his eyes was almost tangible. When I broke eye contact, I noticed he was holding something in one hand, something with a handle. I have no idea what it was. It could have been anything from an axe to a hairbrush, but I didn't care at that point. I drove faster than I've ever driven on that road. I flew up my driveway, sprinted inside, locked every door, grabbed a rifle we kept in the hall closet, turned on the outside floodlights, and waited. I was home alone that weekend, so there was nobody to wake up. I sat on the steps, looking out the front window until the sun came up. I relaxed a bit when I saw the sunrise, and I finally managed to fall asleep in the living room with the TV on at about 9 in the morning. I paid close attention to everyone I saw on the road for the next week or so, but I never saw that man again. I have no idea who he was or what he wanted from me, and I'm perfectly content not knowing.
The Big Wiggly's got a lot of stories, I'll tell you what.
The Big Wiggly.
The Big Wiggly. That last story actually reminded me of a podcast I listened to called Strange Familiars. It's a smaller paranormal podcast. Timothy Renner runs it. He's an author who does a lot of Sasquatch investigation. But he interviews people who have weird paranormal experiences, right? And a recurring theme on his show is what is called the Flannel Man, which is this apparition or apparitions, sometimes multiple, of a person who is wearing a flannel checked shirt. It seems to be something that comes up a lot in his show, and here's another instance of that kind of out of place person wearing a flannel checked shirt. I don't really know if there's any kind of explanation for it, but even his wife has seen this apparition in the bedroom of a guy with a flannel shirt. They kind of have a lumberjack look to him. It's weird.
That's so crazy because I have never heard about that, but I'm gonna have to like go down the rabbit hole, I guess.
Yeah, that's the only place I've ever heard of the Flannel Man phenomenon, and it just, for some reason, on Tim's show, it's a recurring theme. It just keeps coming up and up and up and up, and I think once it becomes a sort of an established thing, then like people are like, oh, I've got a Flannel Man story. This is where I send it to, right? This is who I talk to about it.
Yeah. Very much so. I wonder if they ever gonna post anything else.
Yeah, I'd like to see if this person has any more stories, but I feel like they've probably gotten most of the good stuff out of the way at this point. That's a lot right there. The untouched property that always seems to be kempt.
Yeah.
That blue light circling around the pond. You'll hear about things like that, with spirit lights, spook lights, will-o-wisp or whatever, in watery areas, in swamps, sometimes in mountains as well. And the Native Americans will say that if you follow these orbs of light, that they'll lead you to your doom or your death. It's cool stuff, really cool stuff.
It is like I said, like I've been reading like folklore and superstition like stuff and like these books that I know I can never find again. Like when I was a kid, that would like tell me like about the signs of stuff and like folklore and yeah, the will-o'-the-wisp was like part of it, And I just think that is like terrifying. Like, if you was like down and like he was in the marshes and the swamps and it's like nighttime and it's like all foggy in there. And then like you lost and you see this light and then like you try to follow it because you think that it's gonna get you somewhere, and then you just like accidentally step in like a bog and be down in it. Like that would be terrifying at nighttime.
Yeah, it's like what is this thing trying to show me? It's like a little fairy floating around. You're like, yeah, I'll follow that to the treasure. No, you're dead, bro.
Yeah, scary.
All right, and our last story for the night is coming to us from the subreddit The Truth Is Here Again. This has been posted by Psychedelic Warlord, and the title is A Swamp with Swans in the Middle of the Woods near a creepy but unremarkable Williamsburg, Virginia neighborhood. And it reads, when I was about 16 in 2010, my family moved from Fairbanks, Alaska to Williamsburg, Virginia, and we wound up in this strange neighborhood. I won't disclose this particular neighborhood or the coordinates of the exact space in question, though I can find them very easily with Google Maps, and it's probably still there. This neighborhood gave me this really cursed vibe, like Children of the Corn shit, and the house we were staying in seemed doubly eerie. We had just moved in, and as I was always the adventurer and the goth kid, I liked to explore the woods and the surrounding neighborhood. Back then, I was raised with having to entertain myself outside, and this translated even to my current adulthood years. I really enjoy getting intentionally lost, and I've seen some shit deep in the woods that gives me nightmares. However, this didn't give me nightmares, but the incident felt so strange and uncomfortable. I go into the woods, and about only 20 minutes in, there's a swamp in there. Steam or smoke rising out of it, and a dead animal bones all around it. Instantly, I thought the swamp to be toxic, except there were 2 swans on the water, dunking their heads in the water as swans do. I scoped it out and decided to go back another day. Second time I went, I decided a deer skull would look really cool in my room. I actually didn't learn my lesson from this. I still collect bones, only in different circumstances. So I put one from the edge of the swamp in my bag and headed home. Something about the swamp just makes you feel like you're being drained. It feels like a nihilistic depression, but as a place. And it was after these events that I also entered a very dark time in my life. As I headed out of the woods for home, everyone in the neighborhood on my way to the house was out on their front porch or lawn, just staring, like ventriloquist dummies, following me with their gaze as I walked home. Strangest thing. I felt like I shouldn't have taken the skull. As a polytheist and occultist later in life, I learned to trust this feeling afterwards. But I put the skull on my dresser in my room. It's important to state that this very same day, I heard the song Hamburger Lady by Throbbing Gristle, so it may have influenced things a bit. Also, I had somehow gotten poison ivy on me because my face broke out in hives, but poison ivy and me were not too uncommonly acquainted. I just felt like it was a bad idea to have taken the skull, but I figured it was just my own fascination with the uncomfortable feelings of confronting morality that made me fear it. The same fascination, however, caused me to cling to it, and so on my dresser it stayed, and sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling something was caressing my face, and sometimes I'd hear a voice wake me from a dead sleep, and after a week I could no longer sleep. That's when the neighbors started showing up, wanting to welcome my family to the neighborhood. They brought cookies and came one family at a time, once a day, for a week. They seemed very conservative and polite, but so was my family, so was I. And every family that visited asked me the same thing, since my parents made it a point to tell them that my now scarred up and oozing face was not acne, but poison ivy. They asked me, "Oh, did you go to the swamp?" And I would reply, "Yeah, the one at the end of the street." And they say, "Did you see the swans?" At first, I thought it was cool that someone else knew about what I thought was my secret discovery in the woods. But then I started to realize after the third time, they were saying it with increasing fervor and implication in their voice. Something my parents noticed even. They asked me if I really did see any swans in the woods, and I told them I had. They thought it was weird and shrugged. Of course, they also asked about the skull, but my family is interesting in that way. They believe in old school Lutheran Christianity, but they aren't in any way superstitious. They didn't care if I brought home bones as long as I wasn't killing animals unnecessarily. But I was heavily unnerved at this point and slightly hallucinating due to the insomnia I was experiencing. The feeling of something standing by me or over me became very real and very scary in my room, even while I was awake during the day. I did something a 16-year-old Christian kid wouldn't usually do. I had a seance, in part because I was very lonely and hoped for a friend from beyond the veil, and in part because I wanted to try to smooth things over with whatever it was. A few Google searches later, and in the dark of my room, with only a candle lit, I started to close my eyes and address the entity directly. The room got really cold, and as I spoke to it, the television in my room turned on to static, my radio turned to static, and the skull fell off the dresser. I freaked, and the next morning, I don't remember much between then and the next morning, I stuffed the skull back into the bag and went out to the swamp. The swans were there on the swamp still. I instantly placed the skull at the edge of the swamp and apologized to whatever entity was pissed that I took its skull. And like a man hypnotized, some strange insanity called me towards the center of the swamp, to a small peninsula in the middle of it where a tree grew. I tried to walk back from the tree. The grass gave way to mud, and I began to sink. Though giant 6-foot teen boy that I was, I pulled myself out of the mud after quite a bit of struggle, though it extended halfway at my waist, and I walked home. The neighbors stared at me like they did when I took the skull as I walked home, muddied from the belly button down. I went into the house and my parents asked what happened. I told them I had stepped deep in mud in the swamp and sunk. The creepy stuff slowed, but the next week the landlord exploded with anger at my family because he did not want to make repairs to the house and told us to leave. He did not evict us, of course, because he could not legally do so, but he said he would not be making any repairs and that he preferred that we leave. So he let my family out of the lease and we moved from there. I was friends with a girl in the neighborhood who was incidentally the first person to ask about the swans. We kept in touch until the day I moved out, and then she shut down her Facebook and I never heard from her again. Last February, I planned to go back. I wanted to see if there were the swans there still, and bones, but with more fleshed out knowledge of the occult and my own belief in the goddess Brigid. I have wondered for a long time if the dead animals were offerings to the swamp, as ancient Celts used to do. A pagan friend of mine in Pennsylvania liked to sink the bones of deer he caught in a swamp behind his house. My own belief is that there may be something akin to a god or a spirit there, and I'd like to make amends with whatever it is. However, I never got the chance. The day before I headed to the swamp, Virginia enforced a mandatory quarantine, and so I headed back home and merely managed to make it out after 6 flight changes. A few days later, they managed to cancel all flights. Not sure if I want to go back. That's some pretty good writing.
I was thinking, man, that story was very, very good. Like, it was very good. Like, it had me, like, in it.
Yeah, it was well written in a way that I feel like either that is someone who is properly recounting a true story that they had and is just good at writing it, or that it's someone who's good at making up fiction. And, you know, I can't tell which way I lean with it. I do think it's a good story. But yeah, I couldn't say.
You couldn't, like, think that you could tell. I don't know. I feel like it was pretty.
Yeah, by reading it, you know, just based on how good of a narrative it was, I couldn't tell you if I really think that it's a true. You know, it feels kind of like an episode of Goosebumps.
That's what I was thinking exactly. Like the house on Dead Street, like on some real shit. Like on some real shit. I was really thinking about that while you was reading it. I was like, yo, that's just some strange shit. And then like they were just like so willing to like just try to like make amends and stuff like that. It seemed like everybody in was on something and something was supposed to happen in the swamp that didn't happen.
Yeah, the thing that got me with it was, you know, all of the creepy neighbors who seemed to be in the know and acted very much the same. Like they were acting coordinated, you know, all the neighbors were. And that's not something you would find in a normal neighborhood. Unless, you know, like unless they're all part of a creepy cult. And this is where we start getting into some sort of like, you know, fiction scenario where it feels like a Goosebumps episode or something.
Yeah, and then like the landlord was in on it or whatever because like they just let him out of the lease like that.
Yeah, like the landlord was probably like the cult leader. They probably sacrifice animals down at that swamp during commercial breaks. I don't know. It's a good story for sure. The believability of it to me is up in the air.
But yeah, I could feel that because I definitely did think, like, it made me think about that Goosebumps book, and I vaguely remember, like, at the end, I think there was like at an amphitheater or something like that, and like all of the people from the neighborhood was there, and they was just trying to like turn him into what they were, you know. And then I guess it didn't work, and because they took it back or whatever.
Yeah, he made it right. Yeah, that's definitely what you would see in that kind of show. That sort of, everything starts going awry, and then he realizes what he has to do, and he takes the bone back, the skull back, and things kind of right themselves. Yeah, I still got to say though, it's a good story, and I hope that's true because it's super creepy. Like it'd be a great story if it was true. I just don't know.
It is.
The swans, the steaming pond. Also, like that's a little bit over the top, probably.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, but he also talked about how like he wanted to go back and visit, and the quarantine kind of shut down all that possibility. Like there might be some truth to it. I just don't know. I really like that story, and I wanted to read it for the last Reddit horror stories episode, but I didn't get to it. Not enough time. So I'm glad we could get to it this episode. But I do think that's probably going to be about the amount of time we have for this one, because some of the stories are really long. I'm sorry to make you read so much, but
it's all good.
Yeah, it was definitely some good stories, and we gotta take some time today to go back out to the witch house. Once again, I'm gonna put those photos down in the show notes so that everyone can check out the witch's house. Unfortunately, I didn't get a very clear shot of the house itself because we were just on the road where we were taking pictures. But there were a whole bunch of like private property, beware of dog signs, and there was a legitimate mailbox there. So I didn't want to just go onto somebody's property if there is someone living there. But you can sort of see the house through the trees, and the stacked rocks was really crazy. Like this place stuck out like a sore thumb in the middle of like a back road. You go down a back road, you know what you're gonna see. Some houses down some gravel driveways, but this one just stuck out. It was weird. It was very weird.
Yeah, and it did, and it's like I don't know. Like when we got there, like I immediately, because I was feeling pretty lost. I just felt like we was going the wrong way, and then like all of a sudden we was going the right way, and then all of a sudden it was just there, like bam, and I was just like, just that driveway. Like I didn't remember it being so slanted, but then like if you look at it, it actually like straightens out. So like,
yeah, when we were driving down there, man, I was just driving. And I look at this area and I'm like, look at that freaking place. Like, what the hell is that? And you're like, I think that's actually it.
Yep. And it was. And it's just like, I was just like really thinking, because I'd be like spur of the moment always with my thoughts. But I would not mind like, getting maybe like 2 more people and just like going out there, like maybe like at nighttime walking down and seeing.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of do want to press my luck and go up there.
Yeah.
Despite all the private property and no trespassing signs, it place is just amazing. It's really cool, like way cooler than I would have imagined.
It's a trailer up there, but I believe the trailer was there before. But except I think it was off to the right, so like maybe it was moved or something. But it was like that. It was there before, so I'm not sure as if it's occupied, but it seems like it's still like the same to me, except like some things I didn't see like the rocks like that, and that definitely was odd.
It was odd. But yeah, that's gonna be all for tonight's episode. Everybody, I want to thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us. Q, I want to thank you for coming and co-hosting this episode and reading some stories for us. They were absolutely amazing.
Oh yes.
And until next time, everybody, have a very Merry Christmas.